The Big Ten Conference has two new members. Today at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, we talked to the two big decision makers in that process from Ohio State's standpoint. That was Athletic Director Gene Smith and President Christina M. Johnson. I'm Nathan Baird from cleveland.com, along with Stephen Means and Doug Lesmerises. Doug, just what jumped out to you today from what you heard from Ohio State's leaders as to why they felt this was a move the Big Ten had to make, or why this is a positive move for Ohio State?
So I thought Gene Smith said the idea of, I don't know the word he used, but like have another big dog in the conference, and obviously talking about USC football, that is good for Ohio State. And I think that's interesting because I think some schools, when you are the big dog in a conference, you don't want another one. You want to be the one on top. But Ohio State has always, under Gene Smith leadership, wanted equal revenue, which means we are bigger and we matter more, but we share the money equally. So then when you bring in somebody else like USC is going to bring value, and then Ohio State doesn't have to carry like as much of the load. And Gene Smith talked about, again, hey, if the Big Ten expands more, could you ever expand in a way where the revenue sharing is unequal? Well, we'll bring this team in, but you don't get 100% cut. And he said, I don't want to do that. So in that world, I mean, USC is about the biggest one you could add. Right? I think they become the second most prominent athletic department in this conference now. They're ahead of Michigan. They're ahead of Penn State. And Ohio State sees that as a good thing. They want to share the load in a world where, and I guess Bama's willing to share the load with Texas and Alabama and Texas and Oklahoma too. But I thought that part of it, we almost want another pair of shoulders in this conference. That's why it's good for Ohio State. I thought that was interesting for Ohio State leadership to say that.
Yeah, Ohio State's long had this identity being kind of like this benevolent, I don't want to say benevolent dictator because they don't think they act as a dictator, but knowing that the gravity that they have and kind of only using their weight when they need to. And I think you're right. I think he's right that adding these schools does shift that balance a little bit. Stephen, what jumped out to you today as being just sort of an important viewpoint from President Johnson and Gene Smith?
Doug's point, first of all, I think he said carry some of the weight. And that's just the reality of the situation is that Ohio State did carry a lot of the weight. But I think that from a business standpoint, he said it himself, the Big Ten's now in the three biggest markets in the country. They're in New York with Rutgers, they're in Chicago with Northwestern, and now with both of those programs aren't necessarily big-time programs. Now you're in L.A. with what USC is, especially now it's going to get rolling with Lincoln Riley. I think that stood out more than anything else is to piggyback off of it can carry its own weight, but it's also like bringing a little bit more weight with it because the Big Ten had at Rutgers, even if it didn't make any sense from a competitive standpoint, because they wanted that market. This makes sense from both a business standpoint and also a competitive standpoint, even if the geographical, logistical standpoint has to still be figured out.
Yeah, I think in the age of name, image, and likeness, too, to be able to tell athletes that you're in New York, Chicago, and L.A., that has a lot of value, and we'll see if that matters as you look at recruiting and things coming ahead. One of the things that was important to me was something they can't say yet, which is to give you the exact number of what this means from a money standpoint. This is at the start of the day, at the end of the day, about what money comes in. But both Gene Smith and Christina M. Johnson kind of repeatedly just sort of hinted, like all they could say was like it's significant, it's big. It was already going to be big. This new rights package for the Big Ten was already going to be estimates of $1.1 billion, and now UCLA and UCLA and USC push that out even farther. You could tell that they already have an idea in their heads of what that's going to mean for the bottom line here in the athletic department and for the school overall.
I just want to say, in a normal functioning world, the idea of a conference stretching from New York to Los Angeles makes no frickin' sense. So that's crazy. It's crazy. So it remains crazy. It's ridiculous that the Big Ten is this big now. That's a bottom line thing. That's never going to not be true. But it's what happened. But we don't want to be Pollyanna like, everything they did is great. Like they're going to say that. This is ridiculous. This is insane. But we also have to think about conferences differently. This is not the end game. But I just want to make sure you guys don't think we're like all in with whatever the Buckeyes say. This is silly. It's silly and it's all about money, but it's happening.
But the silliness didn't start yesterday. This is
No, but New York to Los Angeles is maximum silliness. So unless you're going to go from Puerto Rico to Hawaii, right? Like this is maximum silliness.
I don't know if it gets any more silly than this because it's at some point it's going to start making sense. I think we've reached like peak level silliness before we start to reel it back in. As Gene Smith got asked, and even if he can't necessarily answer that question right now, are other teams going to get at it? Yes, eventually other teams are going to get at it. So that's how the ideas go, right? It starts out like, and then it starts to get really kind of ridiculous, and then eventually it's like, oh, that makes sense now. We're just in the crazy range right now because now we have to plan to go to L.A. every other year.
Look, it can absolutely get sillier than this. Add Seattle and Miami to the Big Ten, and now you're really stretching things out. But we'll have much more to say about this on Buckeye Talk, and get that wherever you can find podcasts, and get the text 614-350-3315.